At 66 years old, exactly 1 year after her arrival, she sat in her apartment reviewing her banking app's annual spending summary, a specific feature she had opened somewhat idly rather than with any particular expectation, and found herself confronting a genuinely uncomfortable recognition she had not anticipated. Despite 12 full months of residence, a completed long-term visa, and what she had believed represented a genuinely settled new life, the specific pattern of her actual daily spending, her restaurant choices, her grocery shopping locations, even the specific route of her regular walks, revealed something she found difficult to fully accept: that she had, in every practical and behavioral sense that actually mattered, continued living as an extended tourist, rather than as a genuine resident of the community she had told herself, her family, and her online retirement community she had fully joined. This is her story, told with genuine honesty about a specific and uncomfortable self-recognition, and what she actually did to address it once she could no longer avoid seeing it clearly. She had retired at 65 from a 32-year career as a corporate human resources director, arriving in the Philippines with what she considered, at the time, genuinely thorough preparation, extensive research into her chosen coastal city, a completed retirement visa application, and a specific and deliberate intention to build authentic community integration, rather than remaining within what she had explicitly told herself she wanted to avoid: an insulated expatriate bubble offering only a superficially different backdrop to essentially the same life and habits she had maintained throughout her American career. The specific spending pattern that prompted her uncomfortable recognition, she wanted to describe with genuine detail, involved a full year of banking data, revealing that approximately 70% of her restaurant spending had occurred at establishments specifically catering to foreign tastes and largely staffed by English-speaking employees, that her grocery shopping had concentrated heavily at a specific supermarket chain carrying imported goods at prices considerably higher than local alternatives she had, she realized upon reflection, never actually visited despite their proximity, and that her social calendar, reviewed with similarly uncomfortable honesty, consisted almost entirely of interactions with fellow American and European expatriates she had met through a specific online community group, with genuine, sustained relationships with local Filipino residents remaining, after a full year, essentially non-existent beyond the specific transactional politeness of her landlord and a small number of service providers she interacted with regularly, but had never actually gotten to know as individuals. Before we get into what she actually did once she recognized this pattern clearly, subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell. Every week on this channel, we share real, honest stories of Americans starting over overseas. Not the polished version, the honest one. Subscribe now so you never miss one. She wanted to be genuinely honest about how this pattern had developed, despite her explicit original intentions, because she felt understanding the specific mechanism mattered considerably more than simply acknowledging the outcome. The expatriate community she had connected with within her first several weeks had offered exactly the kind of immediate, low-friction social connection that any new arrival genuinely craves. English language conversation requiring no cultural translation, shared reference points and cultural assumptions requiring no explanation, and a specific and genuinely helpful practical support network for navigating the logistical challenges of establishing a new life abroad: banking, healthcare registration, visa renewal processes, that had made relying on that community, in the moment, feel like simple pragmatism rather than any conscious choice to avoid deeper local integration. Each individual decision, choosing the restaurant her expatriate friends recommended and frequented, shopping where the online community group suggested for reliable quality, had felt reasonable and unremarkable in isolation, a pattern of small, individually sensible choices that had, cumulatively and without any single deliberate decision point, produced exactly the insulated pattern she had originally, explicitly wanted to avoid. The specific moment of recognition, reviewing that banking summary, had produced what she described as genuine embarrassment rather than simple, mild disappointment. an emotion she wanted to examine honestly because she felt it illustrated something significant about how seriously she had actually taken her original stated intention. She had, throughout her first year, described her life abroad to family and friends back in the United States, and within her own online retirement community, using language that implied considerably deeper integration than her actual behavioral data revealed. Not through any deliberate dishonesty, she wanted to clarify, but through a specific and genuine self-deception she had not recognized until confronted with the specific, unambiguous evidence of her own spending and social patterns laid out numerically, rather than filtered through her own more flattering internal narrative. She wanted to walk through the specific and deliberate changes she implemented once this recognition became impossible to avoid, because she felt the general resolution to try harder or be more open, without specific behavioral commitment, would likely have produced the same gradual drift back toward comfortable expatriate patterns that had characterized her first year. She began, specifically, by identifying and committing to a single local public market, deliberately different from the imported goods supermarket she had defaulted to for her weekly grocery shopping, a commitment that required, in her first several visits, genuinely uncomfortable navigation of vendor interactions without the English language ease and familiar product selection she had grown accustomed to. Discomfort she specifically pushed through rather than retreating from at the first sign of friction, recognizing, upon reflection, that her previous year's pattern had likely developed precisely through her tendency to retreat toward comfort at exactly these kinds of minor friction points. She also made a specific and deliberate decision to enroll in a structured Tagalog language course, a step she had genuinely intended to take during her original pre-arrival planning, but had, over her first year, repeatedly deprioritized in favor of more immediately pressing logistical concerns, a pattern of deprioritization she recognized, with the benefit of her uncomfortable recognition, as itself part of the broader avoidance she was working to address, rather than a genuinely neutral scheduling decision. The course, meeting 3 times weekly with a small group of fellow foreign residents and a local instructor, had, over the following 6 months, provided both practical language capability and, she noted with some surprise, a specific and unexpected secondary benefit, connecting her with several fellow students who shared her own explicit dissatisfaction with their first year's insulated pattern, several of whom became genuine collaborators in a broader, mutual commitment to more authentic local integration that none of them had felt equipped to pursue entirely independently. The specific turning point in her actual community integration she wanted to describe with particular detail arrived through a decision, prompted partly by her language instructor's direct suggestion, to attend a neighborhood fiesta celebration roughly 7 months after her recognition, an event she had, during her first year, specifically avoided, having found the prospect of attending a genuinely local community celebration without any expatriate companion or English language support system considerably more intimidating than she had wanted to admit to herself at the time. She attended alone, deliberately, having concluded that bringing an expatriate friend for social comfort would likely reproduce exactly the insulating pattern she was specifically working to disrupt, an experience that had begun, by her honest account, genuinely awkwardly, standing somewhat apart from the main celebration for its first hour before a specific, and to her, genuinely significant invitation arrived. An elderly local woman gesturing her toward a table of extended family members, and, through a combination of her own developing but still limited Tagalog, and the family's patient accommodation, drawing her into genuine conversation and shared celebration that extended well into the evening. She wanted to be honest that this single event had not on its own resolved the broader pattern her first year had established, describing instead a gradual, ongoing process across the following year, during which she deliberately and repeatedly chose local rather than expatriate-oriented options, across the same categories her banking review had originally revealed: restaurants, shopping, social activities. A process she credited with producing, by her 2-year mark, a genuinely different and more integrated pattern than her first year had contained. Though she was careful to note she did not consider the process complete or the work of genuine cultural integration ever fully finished, but rather an ongoing commitment requiring continued deliberate attention rather than a problem permanently solved through any single decisive action. When asked what she would tell someone earlier in their own relocation process who might be developing a similar pattern without yet recognizing it clearly, her answer focused specifically on the value of periodic, honest, data-driven self-assessment, rather than relying on subjective impression alone, recommending that anyone genuinely committed to authentic local integration review their own actual spending and social patterns with the same unflinching specificity her banking summary had forced upon her, ideally well before a full year had passed and the pattern had become as thoroughly established as her own had, since she suspected earlier recognition would have made the necessary behavioral changes considerably easier to implement than the more deliberate, effortful correction her own delayed recognition had required. If you are watching this and have moved abroad with genuine intentions toward authentic local integration, she wanted to leave you with the specific reframe her own uncomfortable recognition had eventually produced. The gap between your stated intentions and your actual behavioral patterns can widen considerably without any single deliberate decision producing that drift, through nothing more than a series of individually reasonable choices toward whatever feels most immediately comfortable in any given moment, and periodically and honestly reviewing your actual patterns, your spending, your social calendar, your daily routes and habits, against your original stated intentions, rather than relying on your own more flattering internal narrative, may reveal a considerably different reality than the one you have been telling yourself and others. A recognition that, however uncomfortable in the moment she first encountered it, ultimately proved genuinely necessary to building the actual integrated life she had originally genuinely wanted. Subscribe to Second Life Abroad and turn on the notification bell. Share this with someone you know who has moved abroad and might benefit from honestly examining whether their daily patterns actually match their original intentions. We will see you in the next one. There is a specific financial dimension of her original pattern she wanted addressed directly, because she felt it illustrated a practical consequence of the insulated behavior her banking review had revealed, one distinct from the cultural and relational costs she had already described. Her actual monthly expenses during her first year, calculated with the same precision she had applied to reviewing her spending patterns generally, had run to approximately $1,400, a figure she had considered reasonable and consistent with her original retirement planning at the time, but which she came to recognize once she began genuinely engaging with local rather than expatriate-oriented options during her second year, represented a meaningfully inflated cost relative to what an equivalent daily life, conducted primarily through local rather than expatriate channels, actually required. Her second-year expenses, tracked with the same care once her behavioral changes had genuinely taken hold, ran to approximately $950 monthly, a reduction of nearly a third that she attributed directly to the same underlying pattern shift: local markets rather than imported goods supermarkets, local eateries rather than expatriate-oriented restaurants, local transportation options she had previously avoided in favor of more expensive but more immediately familiar alternatives favored within her